Okay, over at the National Review, there is a piece by Jack Butler about Rachel Maddow, the MSNBC host, who is often very strident and very opinionated, and she is talking about in this piece. He quotes her as talking about Lord of the Rings and other things like physical fitness that are markers of you being probably a right winger. If you like Lord of the Rings, you're probably a right-wing lunatic. So here's the quote from Ms. Maddow. She's talking about Peter Thiel, the tech venture capitalist, tech boy, whatever, and J.D. Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy, senator from Ohio, and Donald Trump, vice president pick. Here's her quote. Mr. Thiel has named his companies after things in the Lord of the Rings series of J.R.R. Tolkien books. Lord of the Rings is a sort of favourite cosmos for naming things and cultural references for a lot of far-right and alt-right figures, both in Europe and the United States. Peter Thiel names all of his things after Tolkien figures, like his company Palantir, for example. Like his mentor, like Peter Thiel, who had given him all his jobs in the whole wide world, Mr. Vance also, when he founded his own venture capital firm, with help from Peter Thiel, named it after a Lord of the Rings thing. Thingy thingamabob. He called it Narya, N-A-R-Y-A, which you can remember because it's Aryan, but you move the N to the front. She means you move the N to the back, because yes, if you take the N, you move it to the back, it spells Aryan. Apparently that word has something to do with elves and rings from the Lord of the Rings series. I don't know. No, you don't. That is one of the 3 elven rings that were divvied up after Celebrimbor forged them. And we know this because we've seen the Rings of Power. Which is where these stories were invented. Not in Tolkien's work. No, but it's very curious that she says this because, Lord of the Rings is a huge, it's like the most famous fantasy ever written. It's been published in like 150 million copies have been sold. It's been translated into more than 40 languages. There's been, the Peter Jackson trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy that Peter Jackson did. More's the pity. And it's huge. Just as films, it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. And then there's the Rings of Power, and one of the most expensive TV shows ever made, even though it's terrible. And then, of course, there's Tolkien himself. So Tolkien, if we keep going down this article here, Tolkien was a conservative guy, but conservative in a way that's very divorced from our sense of what's liberal or conservative in 2024 in American politics. He was a conservative Catholic in Great Britain. He fought in World War I. He was definitely what you would describe as anti-fascist. So here's a bit from this. The German publisher he was working with wondered whether he was Aryan. This is in 1938, when he was trying to get The Hobbit published in Germany. So, right during all that nonsense, is getting published throughout the world. This is just one place. But speaking to his English publisher, Tolkien wondered whether the country's lunatic laws required confirmation that he was, and if so, preferred no German translation appear at all if it meant giving any color to the notion that he, quote, subscribed to the wholly pernicious and unscientific race doctrine. So right away, we have a pretty good sense that Tolkien wasn't putting Narya in his books so that you could, find some hidden coded fascist Nazi shit, right? Which is insane and clearly just coming from a place of ignorance and nonsense from Rachel Maddow. But here's a quote from his letter replying to the Germans who asked him if he was Aryan. I am not of Aryan extraction, that is, Indo-Iranian. As far as I am aware, none of my ancestors spoke Hindustani, Persian, Gypsy, or any related dialects. Oh, sick burn. But if I am to understand that you are inquiring whether I am of Jewish origin, I can only reply that I regret that I appear to have no ancestors of that gifted people. My great-great-grandfather came to England in the 18th century from Germany. The main part of my descent is therefore purely English, and I am an English subject, which should be sufficient. I have been accustomed nonetheless to regard my German name with pride, and continued to do so throughout the period of the late regrettable war in which I served in the English army. I cannot, however, forbear to comment that if impertinent and irrelevant inquiries of this sort are to become the rule in matters of literature, then the time is not far distant when a German name will no longer be a source of pride. And Jack Butler, the author of this article, ends his piece with, "Conservatives often complain rightly that the left dominates vast swaths of our culture. The left, in its arrogance, now wants to deem those aspects of culture the right still appreciates to be far right, and therefore somehow suspect. But if it continues to apply such labels to popular and accessible things, such as patriotism, fitness, and the Lord of the Rings, then it shouldn't be surprised if someday conservatives return as kings of our national life." I'm not sure, not sure I'm going to predict that will happen, but I do agree that the arrogance here from people like Maddow is very, it's obnoxious. It's the exact kind of thing that contributes to what people call red pilling, right? When enough bullshit comes from the left, right? You get canceled because you say something wrong. You don't toe the line on enough of the social issues that the left has made sacrosanct. You tip over a few too many sacred cows, and you find out that, liking things like the gym or Tolkien makes you a right winger. Well, pretty soon people start to say, well, you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not actually welcome in as a Democrat or as a liberal, as a progressive or whatever, which is crazy because Tolkien, of course, has been historically hugely popular across political divides. His work, while it has themes of that touch on our culture and society and the quest, they're very universal, right? Like, he doesn't really insert a lot of modern politics into his stories. They're timeless. They deal with questions of good and evil and power and nature and spirituality and love and camaraderie and all this other stuff that really transcends political lines. That actually things that show how much more alike we are than how we are different. So I just wanted to rant about this real quick because I think it's just so ludicrous. It's just it boggles the mind. And at the same time, I do want to just point out that I don't love that Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance and these other techno billionaires are using terms from Lord of the Rings to name their big companies. I think it's very, I don't know, I guess anti-Tolkien to me. Like, if I was going to name something after a Lord of the Rings thing, to quote Maddow, a thing, I would, I'd name a trail, a garden, a bookstore, a public library, a sword, like all these things that would make sense to name them after those things. But naming your venture capitalist firm after something from Tolkien feels gross to me. It really does. It feels gross in the same way that calling everyone who likes Tolkien right wing is gross. It's very, I don't know, especially if you're a fan of Tolkien, but your best use of something from Tolkien is to name your venture capitalist. It just feels like completely wrong. And it just makes me all like, ugh. We did name, when I was a kid, our dog, who was like a basset hound, we named him Baggins. I almost said Bilbo. I was like, that's not right. Baggins. And he was my age. So when I was a kid, I grew up with Baggins, and he ended up dying from cancer, which is very sad. It was pretty much my first brush with death, which I guess is one great thing with pets, is that you learn to deal with that when you're, in a softer, gentler way than hopefully dealing with the loved ones that are human, or elvish, or dwarven. But anyways, I think naming a dog after something from Lord of the Rings is great. And naming a kid, if you want to name your kid Aragorn, go for it. But naming your venture capitalist firm, or taking Tolkien's work and turning it into a totally bastardized fanfic TV show like Rings of Power, those things make my skin crawl. So, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Shout out in the comments. Thank you for watching. Peace. I think I said thank you for watching twice and now 3 times, so triple thank you.